The Tao of Self-Confidence, Episode 873. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence, where I share stories of amazing women who have discovered their inner journey to self-confidence. Visit our website at thetaoofselfconfidence.com. Your inner journey to self-confidence awaits. Well, hello friend. Welcome to the Tao of Self-Confidence. My name is Sheena Yap Chan, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. This one's a little bit different. I was actually the interviewee, as I was interviewed by Kyle, who hosts a podcast called What Kind of Asian Are You? So I hope you enjoy today's interview and you get some nuggets out of it. And next week we'll have a brand new episode of another amazing woman's journey to self-confidence. So enjoy today's episode.
Hello listeners, welcome to What Kind of Asian Are You podcast, a podcast featuring conversations about being Asian. I am your host, Kyle. Conversations about being Asian is so important, especially if you want content that you can relate to, that you could use to get inspired and be motivated. And we are here for that exact reason. If you want to support us in our journey to provide these stories for those that want it, just like us, follow us on social media. Our Instagram is at What Kind of Asian Pod. You could share us to your friends and family, introduce them to a few of your favorite episodes, get them to become a fan. Leave us ratings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can leave a review. In addition to that, if you want to support us financially, buy me a coffee. The link is in bio. Today's episode features Sheena Yap Chan, a keynote speaker, entrepreneur, podcaster, writer, and all-around amazing human being. Our conversation was about her story, her experiences being an Asian woman growing up in Canada, how she became who she is today, helping others be their best authentic self with lots of confidence. And we talked about her book that's coming out or is out already now. You should all go and buy it, support your Asian storytellers. It was a great conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Now to the episode. Today, special guest as usual, but this time it's like literally someone I've been wanting to have on. I think I've been saying that a lot this season, but honestly, it's been such a blessing to have the people that I want to interview, have a conversation with, agree to coming on the podcast. And without further ado, I have Sheena Yap Chan. How are you doing today?
Hey, Kyle. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here today. And, so glad we got to meet a couple months back in person in downtown Toronto. So, yeah, super excited to be here. Such an honor to be a guest. And a little bit about me. So I have a podcast called The Tao of Self-Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self-confidence. And that was really important for me just because growing up in Toronto, I never saw anybody that looked like me on TV or any form of media. So I never want our current and future generations to feel what I felt, not feeling good enough because I didn't look a certain way. And so I started the podcast as a support system for Asian women who had confidence issues like me, and also creating better representation. We're still seen by our negative stereotypes. We're not advancing in leadership roles. Asian women are still seen as sex objects. So I really want to create better representation for that. So in February of 2021, we launched one of our books called Asian Women Who Boss Up, where we highlight the stories of 18 Asian women who are able to forge their own path, overcome obstacles, and thrive. And I have my upcoming book coming out next month for Asian Heritage Month, which is the same name as the podcast, The Tao of Self-Confidence. And it's really about talking about the things that our Asian parents don't tell us to talk about, the things we go through, especially as Asian women, the traumas, as the Asian community, we go through a lot of trauma, right? And sometimes we're not even aware of the traumas that we have, carrying the traumas not only of ourselves, but our parents, our grandparents, because intergenerational trauma is very common, but not talked about. So it's really just, talking about, different forms of trauma, the model minority myth, the things Asian women go through, and how we can heal through that and move past through it. Talking about things like self-love, different ways to build confidence. And, there's a lot of leadership books out there, but nobody really talks about, the reason why we can't move forward, right? And it's important to learn to heal through our traumas and not let it take over us. Because most of the time, especially Asian women, we're just told, to live one way of life, never really make any noise, are always in the background. We have to show up a certain way. We have to take care of everybody else and forget to take care of the most important person, which is ourselves. And so this is really an important topic. And especially now that Everything Everywhere All at Once has been, just breaking barriers, making history, being a voice for Hollywood. We still need representation in all other parts of the industry. And so this is why this book is so important. Not only does it talk about confidence, but really helping women become the leader that they're meant to be. Because it's like, you can be a leader, but if you're not healing through the things that you're going through, you're not going to be the best leader. It's kind of like if you want to learn karate, you're not going to throw the best kick if you feel like you're not good enough, right? I can teach you the techniques, but mentally, if you feel like you're not good enough, you're not going to throw the best kick. And so it's the same thing. You really got to, weed out those things that's holding us back so we can show up as our authentic and best self.
That's amazing. And it's honestly such a big difference when, talking to a podcast professional, because you were able to just so clearly tell the audience who you are, what you're going to about. And, makes my life easier as a host and just editing this, because you can just speak the whole episode and I'm not going to really, put in any more else, because sometimes with like non-podcast people, they might be very like, I don't know what to say, or you already have it. And we definitely have to dig into like your experience with all that and more. But you mentioned like your kind of what you do and all that stuff, but I want to really dig into how you got to where you are. So all my guests, I kind of want to hear a little bit about how was it growing up for them, wherever they grew up and all that fun stuff. So can you just go through kind of your background and most importantly, what kind of Asian are you?
That's a great question. I mean, so of course, I moved here to Toronto from the Philippines in 1989. So I was 7 years old. My parents decided to move here so we can have a better life. And really, everything really stemmed from my upbringing, mentioning earlier that I never saw anybody that looked like me on TV. So it was really hard for me to embrace my own culture. Like the first Asian show I ever saw on TV was All American Girl with Margaret Cho. That only lasted one season. And then, 25 years later, then we had The Joy Luck Club, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. But then after that, there was nothing, right? And I went back to the Philippines when I was 13 because my grandfather was sick. So we lived there for 3 years. And then living under two Asian cultures is also, different because there's different standards, right? Especially in Asia, everyone wants to have fair skin because that's the definition of beauty. If you have darker skin, you're considered ugly. And it's still prevalent until now. You go to different Asian countries, not just the Philippines. You go to Vietnam, you go to Thailand, you go to Korea. There's always big billboards of whitening creams, whitening products. And people don't realize that it's not only the Asian community who uses it, but, people in underrepresented groups, people of color. People don't realize that whitening product, multi-billion-dollar industry. So growing up in two different Asian cultures was different, of course, right? I have family, relatives that tell you have to act a certain way. And then there's another culture where it's also kind of similar, but different at the same time. But when my grandfather passed away, we moved back to Canada and we've been here since. And so, just being an Asian woman, working in a regular job too, sometimes they look at you and they think you're quiet because of the negative stereotypes. And sometimes too, unfortunately, it's the women who bring us down sometimes. And I know a lot of people are afraid to say that, but, I'm not afraid to say it because this is the reason why we don't advance as fast, right? We have to learn to work together versus working against each other because men are always working together on stuff. And that's how they move forward. That's how they're able to excel and create the things that they want. And so if women did the same thing, just imagine how much we could do. And it wasn't, and I always realized that working a job wasn't for me. I mean, I worked at my job for 12 years, but sometimes I would just, like sit in my cubicle and think to myself, is this really all for me? Like, I work till I'm 60 and I retire. Like, I just couldn't see myself doing that. And sometimes I would drive to work, and when I got there, I'd be like, how did I get here? Like, I knew how to get there, but it's like, it's just kind of like clockwork, and you're just like, you don't realize like this is your routine every single day, right? And you're like, what am I doing with my life? And so it wasn't really until my aunt's sudden death where I realized life was so short, right? She was in her late 50s, but she was able to do a lot of things in her 50s that most 20-year-olds would love to do. And of course, at that age, you have relatives that'll tell you, why are you doing that? You're too old. How, you got to take care of yourself. And so it made me realize, like, what is the type of life that I want to live, right? I don't want to leave behind here thinking, I regretted doing all the things that I wanted to do. So that was basically, I guess, the starting point. I mean, nothing happened overnight, of course, especially if you've been comfortable in one situation. It takes a while to, change your environment. And so it wasn't actually until I realized, my mortgage was up for my condo, and I said, instead of renewing it, I'm just going to sell it. I basically sold my condo, quit my job, and just started my path. And I had no clue what I was going to do, to be honest. My parents weren't happy either. They were like, what are you doing? But it really stemmed from there. And there was a lot of mishaps, a lot of failures, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of like feeling not worthy. And so people, sometimes they see you on social media and they think, oh, you have it, I'll figure it out. Oh, you're so confident. But that's not how it works. There's days where you're just like, what am I doing? What did I get myself into? There's days where you're depressed. There's days where you're not confident. Like, it's literally a roller coaster. Yeah, you can pick your own time, but sometimes you could be working 24 hours straight in a day, right? And, doing this path is not easy, right? Trying to make a voice for Asian women, there's a lot of people out there who complain they want representation, but yet do nothing about it. And of course, if we want representation, it really has to start with ourselves doing the work, even if it means we don't know what we're doing, even if it means if we're starting from zero, we have to start somewhere so that we can create that change that we want. So, I mean, this it's been a crazy ride for sure. There's days where I've wanted to quit. There's days sometimes I would sit back and be like, is this something that I really want to do? Right? Is what I'm doing even making a dent? Does it make sense? And, that's normal because, sometimes we don't know what we're doing, right? But we're capable enough to figure things out along the way. And most men do that, right? They just figure it out along the way. When you ask them, how do you do that? Most of the time they're like, I don't know, but they just make it happen. And if women just did the same thing, just kind of just make mistakes along the way, ready, fire, aim instead of ready, aim, fire, we'd accomplish so much more. I mean, I go out there, I reach out to people, I reach out to communities, and there's days where I'm like, this is depressing. When you get ghosted, you get rejected, but I realize if I don't take any action, then nothing happens. And then I focus on the people who do respond, and you'd be surprised what could happen, right? I know sometimes as women, we've been conditioned to like not make the first move. Hollywood doesn't help either when you have like Disney movies who will tell you that Prince Charming is going to come and save you. And in reality, there's no Prince Charming that's going to save you. And it doesn't help too that as women, we shame each other, right? They're like, oh, how dare she do that? That's so unladylike. And so this is why sometimes it can be difficult. But when you work on yourself and realize, those you can learn to just keep moving forward. I mean, that's when results happen, right? It's all about taking action, making results, failing forward, knowing that you don't have to show up perfect. It's okay to show up messy. I show up messy all the time.
That's amazing. So much I'm just like absorbing, like, oh, I need to do that more, or like everyone needs to know this. But the question I've been having as you're talking about like your journey and such is your original beginning in terms of your relationship with your kind of road to the confidence you have now. Because from the outside looking in, of course, like you mentioned, there are days where you're not confident at all, or you're dealing with stuff. But on the surface, you are very confident, or at least you understand the concept of self-confidence, self-esteem, all that stuff that you can apply so that you can get the things that you want to get started or done. So what was it like at the beginning when, confidence is like something you build on as you grow up? So how was it for you in terms of your understanding of it from the beginning to where you kind of be like, you had that switch where it's like, oh, confidence is this. I need more of it, how I can approach it so that I could accomplish what I want to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, when I first started building my confidence journey, I always thought there was one way of being confident. When you grew up in a culture where you're only doing one way of things, you would think the same thing about self-confidence. So I thought you had to be loud and boisterous and be out there. But really being confident is just being okay to show up as your true self. You can be an introvert and still be confident. And that took a while, right? Because people don't teach this at school. They don't tell you to be your true self or to show up as your authentic self. And so you're not sure what you're doing half the time, right? But being able to interview so many Asian women and hearing their stories and realizing we all go through similar things. It's just a breath of fresh air, and people crave for more authenticity. People are sick and tired of seeing filters and perfection because it's not relatable. And so it's really just being able to be vulnerable and showing up as your true self and being okay that you're not perfect, right? And, being able to love yourself unconditionally, the good, bad, and the ugly. And so confidence is something that you work on every single day of your life because there's going to be new challenges, new pushback, new setbacks, new environments that we have to learn to adapt. I mean, I think the pandemic was a big example of like adapting to something that we didn't know was going to happen, right? I literally thought it was going to be the end of the world, honestly. I was ready to just watch K-dramas all day and eat junk food. But, we have to work on that every single day, especially as we're growing. There's going to be new things that we're going to encounter and be like, why is this happening to me? And instead of saying, why is this happening to me? It's like, there's a reason why you're in this position. It's going to help you grow. There's going to be a lesson to it. There's always something that you can learn or gain from it. And so, just being able to realize that there's so many ways to build confidence. There's not just one way, right? Because every single person is different. What may work for me might not work for you and vice versa. And that should be okay because we're all different. I remember one time, I tried meditating, I'd put audio on and I would sit on my bed and be closing my eyes and going, and then I would just fall asleep. And I did that 20 more times and it was just a hot mess. So I was I just realized it's not for me, right? And for me, I like to jog outside. I like to be in nature when the weather's warm, of course. That's where I can feel like I can dump all my thoughts. I feel good. I'm ready to take on the day. That's my form of meditation. So being able to find different ways that works for you is really important because if it's not going to work for you, then it's not, right? You're not going to try your best to learn it if it's not that method for you. So those are some of the things I've learned along the way. And as we keep, moving up, there's always going to be different challenges. There's no such thing as smooth sailing. And sometimes, there's days where shit hits the fan and you're like, okay, how can we move out of this? What can we learn from this? What could be our next step forward?
For sure. And there's a couple of things that you mentioned just now where it's I just thought it was curious to know more about is where you mentioned there's a certain way to be confident, which is to be loud, boisterous, and all that stuff. Was it something that you kind of felt coming from family in terms of them be you need to be more confident or whatever it may be? That's how you be confident? Is that how you feel that's what confidence is, or is just everywhere around you that made you feel that way? And were you introverted? That's why you had this kind of, where it's I don't know how to be confident in a way that still remain true to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think living in Canada too, right? One thing I love about Toronto is we're very multicultural. So seeing different cultures and, seeing other people being loud and boisterous and being out there, I just assumed that's what confidence was. And, I was very insecure about myself. I never felt I was good enough. I never felt I was worthy. And so, I would always want the opinion of other people. Or if I did something out there, I was always afraid of what other people would think of me. And of course, that's not healthy, right? And it took a lot of work and a lot of unprogramming to, accept myself for who I am, flaws and all. And so yeah, it was really like, sometimes our upbringing too doesn't help because it's like you have to act a certain way, you have to be a certain way, or else you're deemed as crazy if you do anything outside of that. And it's hard because it's like you're trapped in your own self, your own body, not being able to show up as your true and authentic self.
Yeah, and when you mention like, oh, you're introverted and like the confidence piece of like feeling insecure and all that stuff, I kind of relate to that where I'm thinking back to myself in terms of my kind of relationship with my own confidence is where at least in my family where it's like in terms of them teaching me like how to be confident or confidence as a whole, it's always the concept of like, well, just do it, just fake it even if you need to. That kind of mindset I feel like for myself to undo because you don't have to fake it sometimes because if you do, then you're not being your true self and this doesn't reflect well at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
talking about like the concept of faking to make it, that's always the one like main thing people is like, if you need to be confident, just fake it to make it. What do you think of this concept as a whole? And do you think it really works for everyone? Because I feel like it seems like it could, but I think there's other things connected to make them feel like, oh, it works for them.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has different answers when it comes to faking it till you make it. And of course, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then don't do it. For me, I like to say that if you were confident in one area of your life, you're able to transfer that confidence into another area of your life, right? You look back at everything that you were the most confident in, and you take that feeling and you transfer it to whatever it is you need to do, right? Whether it's starting a new business, starting a new practice, even, I don't know, asking a guy out, whatever it is, you transfer that confidence, right? Because if you're able to accomplish something in that area, then you should be able to accomplish it in the other area just by transferring it, right? That's how I see it. And so, sometimes when I'm feeling doubt or not feeling good enough, or I feel like, is this possible? I just look back at the things I've been able to do and kind of transfer that confidence and just go out there. And yeah, sometimes it's easier said than done, but this is why you have to work on yourself every single day, right? Because it's like, you're working on your confidence muscle so that, when things arise, you have the tools and resources to overcome it quicker than normal.
Wow. And just hearing you throughout and just the stuff that you do, I could feel like, yeah, it's been a process. You did your work. You worked on yourself and get to the point where, confidence is, you live it, you practice it, and you should give off such a great vibe of confidence in terms of when everyone sees you. And I think that's great. And it's just something, it seems like you worked on it as you were growing up. And then to the point where, like you were saying like earlier, you quit your job, you sold your condo, and then your next steps. And it seems like it's related to the whole concept of be confident, helping others. So how did that kind of transition? Because you mentioned that you did a job, just, whatever, I assume it's corporate or whatever it may be, for X amount of years. You were fine with that. You could just be confident and all that stuff and still do those things and whatever. But it seems like you transitioned to doing what you're doing now. So can you just talk about that transition?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, it stemmed from my aunt's death, right? She passed away, so sudden, and it just made me realize, the quality of life. What is that quality of life that I want to live, right? Do I want to keep working for someone else, or do I want to go out there and do my own thing? And of course, there's nothing wrong if you have a job that you love. That's great, right? Because not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Some people just want to work at that. That's okay. But I know there's a lot of people out there who hate their jobs too, right? And want something more out of their life. And so, yeah, I mean, from there, I just, started thinking like, what can I do? What's the next step? Sometimes if you ask the right questions, the right answers appear to you. So, that's what happened. I just realized, my mortgage was coming up. Instead of renewing, I was going to sell it. And I realized like I had enough money to quit my job and kind of just figure things out along the way. I always did my best to figure things out, right? Was it always easy? No. Especially when you're out there on your own and you're like, when's the next paycheck coming, right? You don't know because you've been so used to having a paycheck every 2 weeks, every month, every so often. But, instead of fearing uncertainty, I started embracing it, because for the longest time I feared it because, especially when you're Asian, you're like, well, what's going to happen? Well, how can you do that? Well, where are you going to get money? Right. And so I realized like, I just had to embrace uncertainty and just be in the moment, create, the things that I want to create, go out there and just live life. And eventually, it comes to you. Right. And of course, it's not like you manifest and things appear. You still got to go out there and take action, right? But, you're more willing to do it because you know where you're heading. You see the bigger picture. So you're willing to take actions that make you feel uncomfortable, that get you scared, that gives you butterflies in your stomach. I mean, I've done that so many times in my life. And I realized that, once I embrace my fears, I know that's where the magic happens on the other side.
So upon this kind of, selling your condo, quitting your job, so did it right away you were like, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to do this kind of consulting, like how to boss up and all that stuff. So what was like the steps towards that? Because right now you are doing so many things. You're like a writer, you're a speaker, you do your podcasting thing, you do a lot of content related matters. That's incredible based on just hearing your story from the beginning where, you had a normal job and then suddenly major life event happened. So then you decided to drop everything and just approach something different. Because I assume what you did in your work previously has nothing really to do with what you do today.
No, definitely not. And for so long, I delayed my own success because I always thought I could figure things out myself. So for like the first 5 years when I started my podcast, I didn't know what to do with it. Honestly, I just knew that I had a platform, but I didn't know how to monetize it, how to put myself out there, how to utilize it to get speaking engagements. And it wasn't until I realized that I needed to ask for help. And especially in our culture, it's deemed as shameful or a handout or weakness if we ask for help. But being able to ask for help is what really fast track my confidence in what I'm able to do today, right? Because I'm not the only one who's doing everything. I have help. I outsource different things. I'm part of a community. And so that has really just, helped me 10x it because I'm not the only one who's doing it. Being able to learn different marketing tactics or, bouncing off ideas from someone or, just being able to have different relationships or hire people for different things. That's what's really helped me because now I realize I don't have to do everything myself, right? And I shouldn't have to because we try to do everything ourselves, we're going to get burnt out and we will not want to do it.
Yeah, and you're talking about like you have your community, you're building a community, you're part of many communities that help one another. That's such a big contrast to what you said at the beginning with your work experience where you couldn't find that community or like people, especially women in your space, didn't really want to help each other because, with Asians, we had this kind of scarcity mindset where it's either me or you. It can't be all of us. And I think that's such a horrible thing to have. And unfortunately, that's just how it was for so long. And it's only, I think, recently we were really trying our hardest to, as a community, be like, we can't do that. We need to help one another. We're our family. We're friends. We work to build together so that we're all going to get to the mountaintop. So with your experience with like everything that you have experienced, what would you say is your kind of perspective on the mentality of like, oh, I have to one up the other person or like I can't really help them kind of way until right now where it's like, oh, community, that's important. We need to help each other.
Yeah, I mean, of course, my mentality has changed. It's not just about me. It's about the bigger picture. And if you're trying to, change the narrative, especially of our community, we have to be okay to ask for help. We have to be okay to reach out, learn to network, learn to say, hey, I'm doing this. I would love you to, I would love your support if you could buy a book, make a donation, refer a client. Like, don't be afraid to ask because you'd be surprised who says yes. Of course, you're going to get ghosted and rejected, but that's part of life, like it's really part of life. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So, have the courage to just ask, right? I mean, if you asked 100 people, hey, can you buy my book? And like half of them said yes. I mean, that's pretty good, is it not? Right? If you ask for a raise and you say you need a $3,000 raise, and he's like, and your boss is like, well, I can only give you 2,500. What are you gonna say? No. That's still $2,500 just by simply asking, right? And of course, your boss is not just gonna give you $2,500 by simply asking. I mean, you can tell them why you deserve that. You put in the work, the company, the ROI is going to be amazing. So of course, if you give them all those reasons, they're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. Right. Like I always shared this one time where my boss was giving me a review and he raised my salary from like 50,000 to 54,000. And I said, it's okay if you can add $1,000 more because anything that ends a number 4 in Chinese culture is considered a bad omen. And even though my boss laughed at me because he thought it sounded ridiculous, he did give it to me because I asked and I gave him a reason. And of course, if anyone's listening and, they're Chinese, they know number 4 is a bad number. Just by being able to ask that, I got $1,000 increase, and it may not be a big number, but, that was $1,000 more dollars just by asking.
That's awesome. And it's so great hearing your story because it's just, you can hear like just so much the work that you put into where you're now, where you built such a great community through your podcasting, through what you do in terms of your writing as well. Can you just talk about your feeling and experience with the community that you built, especially online? Because I could see it where you built such a great community for especially podcasters, especially for those that are Asian women in the podcasting space. So can you just talk about your kind of experience building that community up and what it's like to have that community?
Yeah, I mean, of course, when I first started podcasting, there was hardly any Asian people podcasting, so I really felt alone at the time. There was like one guy from California podcasting about other Asian people, and I was like, if he's doing it, then I'm going to do it. And so, I was trying to find groups on Facebook, and every time I looked for Asian women, it was always like Asian women dating white men, Asian women dating black men, tips for dating. And I was like, is that all we're good for? So of course, I started my own group, I put Asian women entrepreneurs, because I was like, well, I don't want to be seen that way. So I started that and, slowly just, started building that community, right? Where people can feel safe, where they can ask questions, where they can promote their products and services. And of course, it's going to evolve into something else as I keep doing this. But we got to start somewhere, right? Creating the podcast, creating the community, creating the groups, Instagram that, showcases other Asian women's podcasts, because like I mentioned back then, there was only like 1 or 2 people, and that, it was really lonely, right? And so I don't want, future podcasters to feel the same way.
Seeing what you have done with like building that community where it's like, I follow that community, your Instagram page is like, I'm constantly seeing so many Asian women doing great podcasts. It's like, oh, I need to check that out, or whatever it may be. And like, it's so nice to see like the constant support within those people in that community.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you have done revolved, like I said, confidence, bossing up, entrepreneurship, and all that. So in regards to all the things that you do, is there something that you really, really be like, I'm passionate about this? Or is this in general anything that could help me help other women, Asian women? That's what I want to do? Or is there specific like outlet or platform that you're really like, I like doing this the most?
I mean, speaking definitely is something I love doing the most, speaking for corporations and events, because there's not enough women speakers, let alone Asian women speakers. And so, just being able to build representation, having more media representation is so important. And so speaking, books, podcasts, Hollywood, that all matters, right? Because media is what enables us to change the narrative. You look at, like BTS, look what they've been able to build. Now they have fans all over the world, like literally all over the world. And it's just amazing to see then, that's the kind of visibility I want, for our community, that, we're not seen just by our cultural background, we're more than that. We're not just our stereotypes. We're way more than that. As you look at like everything everywhere all at once, it talks about an ordinary immigrant Asian woman becoming the lead and the heroine in the movie. That's huge, because usually the ordinary immigrant Asian woman is like the least visible.
So I feel like from what I can hear, like representation is kind of your passion in terms of what you want to do. So what do you feel like for yourself representation is, and what is like the most ideal thing in regards to representation? Because there's always like the whole concept of like there's good representation, but there's also bad representation. So what's your thoughts on it, and how do you approach, be involved in like the movement to get better representation?
Yeah, I mean, being able to show up and speak up is important. Talking about issues that aren't talked about enough, like, the anti-Asian hate, the representation of, Asian women in corporate roles, not enough leadership, all these things that we rarely talk about, we have to talk about it. We have to speak up. And it's not easy always speaking up. I totally get that. It can be scary at times, especially in the world of the internet. There's a ton of keyboard warriors. One thing, you say one thing, you might get canceled. I totally get it. It's not easy. But we got to go out there and, show up and speak up. And if we make a mistake, we just apologize for it, right? That's it. Like, if I make a mistake, I'll apologize, because there's no point trying to say like, well, you're wrong and I'm right. It doesn't do anything, right? If you make a mistake, you just apologize, and people appreciate that. Especially owning up to your mistake is really important, because we're human. We're not robots. We're not perfect. And if we're not aware of these things, then how can we learn from each other? And so I think, being able to create good representation is by leading by example, right? And, it's not always easy, especially when it comes to promoting yourself. Like, if it were up to me, I would just like watch Netflix all day, really. But, I get a lot of women asking me like, how do you know if it's too much? I'm like, I don't know. I just go out there and promote myself. I just go out there and put myself out there, because for the longest time we've been so invisible. And if people don't like us, they're not going to like us, because we're not going to be able to please everybody. Do you ever hear guys asking when enough is enough? Of course not. And especially when we live in the world of social media. Back then they said you would need at least 7 times before a person will start buying your product. Well, now with TikTok and Instagram and all these other social media outlets, it's going to be like at least 20 something times before someone buys your products. So that's why I say, I don't know, just keep going out there and sharing it, right? Like, who cares? You're providing something that can help a person change their life for the better. And so instead of overthinking it, just put it out there, and just let it go. Just let it go. And like I said, I know it's easier said than done, because there's still times where I'm like, well, should I post it? Shouldn't I post it? Should I share it? Shouldn't I share it? But I just do it, because I know it's not just about me. It's showing, other women, especially Asian women, that, it's okay to promote yourself. It's okay to share your products and services. And then, the more you keep sharing it, the more confident you'll feel. Especially when, someone's like, well, I saw your post, I just bought your book or bought your coaching program. I mean, how good would that you feel, getting money just by being able to promote yourself? So, yeah.
Definitely. And I think for me, you can just keep going at it. Like you mentioned, if it's too much, they will let you know.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. And if it's really too much, you can adjust. But if you don't feel like it's too much, you keep going at it, someone will appreciate it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't let our own like insecurity or like our thoughts really just stop you from doing what you really want to do. Just don't let people know, because if you know that what you're doing is correct, right, nothing's wrong with what you're doing, why stop just because people don't have the same wavelength as you?
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, a lot of times like men, they just do it and then worry about it later. I think like for yourself, like you mentioned, like Asian women need to don't exhibit that kind of mindset a little more in terms of how they move, rather than like think of it first before they proceed.
Yeah.
Because I think it allows you to be like starting something on the first kind of approach, so that you aren't late for anything else. Because I think it's oftentimes, at least with a lot of Asian related stuff, is like us not taking the first step right away. If you have done so, then you're going to be so much further down the road compared to other people. Like, we always like to say it's a marathon, is a journey, but you still need to be going at a quicker pace than what you think. Oh, we gotta pace it out, all that stuff. There's got to be a plan. But if you could be like right away from the jump, where like you get to the end of the finish line and you can do more, why not, right? And like we talked a lot about like your journey, just how you got upon it, and now your book is coming out. We got to talk about the book.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. So how is it to be a writer with a book coming out?
It's awesome and nerve-wracking at the same time. Like, this is my first book with a traditional publisher with Wiley. So I had to write this book in less than 3 months so that it can launch next month for Asian Heritage Month. And, not only is May Asian Heritage Month, it's also Mental Health Awareness Month. So the book, ties both, right? We talk about mental health, we talk about trauma, model minority myths. This all affects our mental health. And the Asian culture, always never wants to talk about mental health. They think it's a taboo. They think if you talk about it, something's wrong with you. If you go see a psychiatrist or a mental health professional, they're going to think something's wrong with you when really nothing is wrong with you, right? It's okay to, seek that help. If it helps you feel better, like it should be okay. And I want to be able to normalize it, right? I mean, I'm not a licensed mental health professional. So that's why I was like, go look for one. I just, been able to realize that we all go through it. I'm a mental health advocate. I think it's important to have outlets where we can feel our feelings, talk about our feelings. And I used to be someone who would never talk about feelings. I would keep everything to myself, never tell my family and friends. Now, I have a group for everything where I share what I feel, what I'm going through, because that helps me out. I can let out all the bad feelings away and bring in new energy, bring in new feelings. And so, whether it's your best friend or listening to a podcast or reading a book, these are great resources for you to work on your mindset, to maintain it, to know that, you need to keep working on it. It's kind of like when you have a car and you need to have an oil change every so often. I mean, it's the same thing. If you don't have an oil change, guess what's going to happen to your car? It's going to break down, right? Same thing with your mental health. If you don't work on it, it's going to break down. And then you're going to be way more behind than you were before. And you're going to, not feel like you're worthy enough or take the steps that you need or have the confidence. So, it's so important to talk about these things, to bring these things up so that we don't feel like we're the only ones going through it. And so, yeah, the book talks a lot about mental health, just the things we go through, different ways to build confidence, different ways to heal trauma. I mean, that I've done. So, it's all through like experiences, sharing little stories, sharing a lot of stats, sharing about our community, what we go through. Can you imagine, like, our community not only had to deal with the pandemic, we had to deal with the pandemic, our everyday life, and the Stop Asian Hate movement. So, of course, our mental health is not going to be, always at prime if we're dealing with all these things. So we definitely need, resources that we can turn to, because we're not only dealing with one major thing, we're dealing with like 3 major things, especially when it comes to the anti-Asian hate crimes, reading stories, hearing things like, I mean, I just recently read that a 72-year-old woman just got punched in the face in New York. And, people in Toronto think racism doesn't happen here, which is far from the truth. I mean, it's just mind-boggling when someone says that. But it happens. It happens everywhere. And so this is why we have to speak about this, bring this up, because if no one else does it, then nothing happens.
Yeah. And yeah, people definitely check out the book, get the book. So you'll learn so much from it. And I mean, like, I haven't read the book yet. I'm planning to pre-order it and get all that stuff. But then you already kind of a little context. I met you for the first time at like a podcast related event where you, I'm not saying you told us about the book, but it shares some familiar contents and whatnot in terms of confidence. And so much of what you have said in that talk was really great in terms of food for thought for me to not just be like, you have to do that, or like, oh, this is the way you're going. It's for you to think of how it could apply to your life. And I think that's what I could see the book doing. But to your own kind of thought, what do you think is the biggest takeaway that you hope that people will get once they read the book and kind of have time to digest it and try to put into action in their life to feel better themselves?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is to just learn to unlock the things that's holding them back. Be aware of that, because awareness is the most important part, right? Because a lot of us aren't even aware there's something holding us back. So, being able to ask your parents, your grandparents, if they're willing to share their story, because we know the older generation keeps everything to themselves. I mean, there's things my grandma will take to her grave, so I totally get it. But if they're able to share it, they should, right? Like we're doing something special for my great grandfather, and, you know, listening to his story or just reading, you know, or listening to his story from my relatives, I realized, you know, he was a great businessman. He was very focused, but it wasn't always a walk in the park. And so I realized that what he had to get through to create a successful business takes a lot of grit and persistence. And so if we know that, then we just keep moving forward, right? We don't give up, we get better. That's his motto.
That's awesome. And like the book is also for sure very exciting. And the other thing that you do a lot of is, you know, these public speaking, these engagements for like those that want to learn more about, you know, confidence and all that stuff. And in your experience doing those talks and such, what has been your kind of biggest points that you remember people mentioning in terms of when they share their story? Because for you now, you're at a point where you're like the sister figure that, you know, they look up to, they look for advice and all that stuff. So what has it been where like when they share like, oh, I'm going through this, that has really maybe not necessarily changed your perspective on things, but like made you really think, oh, that's something I could look deeper into and see how I could like think of it in another way?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I think people just love knowing, like, you know, confidence isn't always perfect. It's messy. They realize, you know, we just go through similar things. We have fears, we have anxiety, we get nervous. And I think knowing that we go through this and we push forward, it just gives them that sense of relief, like, oh, okay, so this is just all part of the process. If we understand that it's all part of the process, we're more willing to do it, right? Sometimes, you know, social media paints this picture like entrepreneur's great, you get to do this, you get to drive fancy cars. Yeah, that is, you know, that you can do that, but really, like behind the scenes, I mean, you know, you're working your ass off, you know. There's days where you probably forget to shower, eat. You know, there's days where you want to cry or quit or feel like, is this where I'm supposed to be? You know, nobody ever talks about those things because, you know, it's not pretty, right? It's not Instagrammable. But, you know, a lot of people want more authenticity. They want to know the truth. And so being able to share those things and realize, okay, well, I know this is what I have to do, and I just go out there and do it. Like if I know that this is what happens, then I'm more willing to do it. I'm going to be like, okay, now that I know this is what I have to do, I just go out there and do it, right? Now I know there's going to be pushback. I'll go out there and do it so that I can get over the pushback. You know, if I'm going to get 1,000 no's, I'm going to get a head start now so I can get those 1,000 no's out of the way and start getting the yeses.
So yeah, so important, and no, so enlightening. Like hearing like your stories where like, I need to practice more of what you're saying that we need to do, because I think we all know what we need to do. It's just putting in the effort to practice it. Because not saying that what you're saying is not important or like it's not groundbreaking, but it's like we have it all along. It's just that we haven't looked deeper and be like, I need to practice this, because I think it's not like you have proprietary like technologies that makes you more confident. You're telling us stuff that we should already know that we can apply. It's just we kind of blocked it off because of whatever trauma or whatever way we were taught. So that undoing. And talking about like trauma and undoing and stuff, you mentioned like growing up, you weren't exactly the most confident. You're introverted, so you're insecure and stuff. So I'm just curious in terms of how your family kind of see you now. Cause I'm sure like your kind of progression from when you were a kid to when you're an adult to now, where there's so many different stages of you where confidence might be a certain level, but now I feel like you're at all the way to the top pretty much because you're an expert on it. You're living it and all that stuff. So what do they find? Are they noticing like a huge difference, or is like it's a gradual thing for them?
Yeah, I mean, it took a while, of course, right? And like, you know, my parents have always been supportive. You know, they brought us to Canada for a reason. I mean, they wanted better opportunities, but in their mind, better opportunities was just working on a job. And I knew like that just wasn't for me. And so, you know, I'm in a country where, you know, we really can go out there and make something for ourselves. And so I just went ahead and did it. Even though they didn't understand it, they supported me. And like when they found out I'm going to be writing a book, they were just like, you know, they were so happy. right? Even my sisters, they were like, I didn't think you would make it this far. I was like, I didn't either. Honestly. And then, even my dad's like, you have a book published? I mean, and it must be good, right? If they published it. Like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's not always easy to get, a traditional publisher to work with you as an author, let alone an Asian person. So, this is why this book is so important. It's not just about me. It's about our whole community. It's about beyond our community as well, right? One of the things that, I always got rejected for was that I was told my story always catered to a specific audience. And I never understood that. It's like, what makes me specific? Because I have smaller eyes. I don't have blue eyes. I don't have blonde hair. Like, what does that mean, right? And we should be sharing our specific stories because that's how we can create new perspectives, new solutions. People can learn about our culture and they can learn different ways to maybe build confidence or heal their traumas, because even though we're all different, we all still go through similar things.
Yeah, and about like the whole being too niche or too specific, I think that's just BS, because at the end of the day, if you can't relate to it and appreciate it, then it's something on you rather than the person that's telling the story. Like, you for sure should be able to like kind of understand it. It's not relatable to you, but you could just accept it and like learn from it still, because we're all on our own path and we're all trying to do our best. And like these kind of Asian story per se, you, as a white person or whatever you may be, you could still enjoy it and appreciate it. You can't be like with the whole review from one person about everywhere. Oh, I always get the movie name wrong, but people watching the movie are, and then that one reviewer said it's too Asian or whatever it may be, like, or even for Turning Red, it's like, I can't relate to it. It's like, well, it's okay not to relate, but you can't deny that is good and it's worth watching, right? And we talked a lot about, what you have done, what you're doing. I know the biggest thing on your mind right now is just the book getting a release, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sure you want to break after this, after the release, but looking ahead, what are you trying to accomplish? What you're trying to do? What you want to get more out of in terms of your kind of progression to being a writer, being in this space, helping other Asian women, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, creating a community where Asian women can feel safe, being able to help them with their own skills, whether it's networking or having more confidence, really create better representation in the media, and not just media, actually in all industries, right? Being able to see like more Asian women just step up, speak up, and be able to do the things that they want to do. And, when we're able to help our own community, it'll just spread like wildfire, right? That we can start, inspiring other cultures and work together, right? Because I know there's a lot of hate going on, but that's not the answer. Like, we really have to learn to work together, especially living in Toronto. There's so many different cultures, different backgrounds. We should be able to work together instead of, fighting each other.
Yeah, for sure. And before we wrap up this conversation, I just want to thank you so much again for agreeing to come on and share your story. And especially when it's a time where you're so busy getting everything sorted, you still gave me time, and it was just so quick. We're like, oh, you want to come on? It's like, yeah, let's set up a time, and we got it done. It was just such a great conversation. So fun talking to you, and I learned so much from you. But there is one question that I've been thinking about asking you. It's really like a silly one, but it's something I've noticed, and it's regarding to your choice of clothing in terms of the color scheme I see constantly on your social media, where it's red.
Yeah.
I feel like since I've been following you, any picture I see you, it's always where some sort of your outfit has red in it. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure there might be a story behind it, or it's just intentional, like, branding or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned to minimalize a lot of things in my life, and that also includes the number of colors I wear in my clothing. And, red's my color. For me, red signifies confidence and courage. And so when there's days when I'm not confident, I put on something red and kind of just seize the day. Even if I'm fumbling, even if I'm like, not even pronouncing words properly, at least I'm confident enough to go out there and take action. And also red is a, happy color in Chinese culture, right? We wear it for celebrating birthdays. It's also a sign of abundance. We get, the ampao, the lucky red envelope. And so not only it's honoring myself, it's still honoring the good parts of my culture. And that's why I wear red. And
yeah,
it's easier.
Like every time I see a picture, it's like, oh, it's always red. It's not like it's bad or anything. It's just it's very like recognizable, or like it has become like where it could be your branding already. Whereas like anytime I think of red and see someone wearing red, I think of you as well in a sense.
Yeah.
Or like even when I didn't see the face of the post and I see red, oh, it could be Sheena. And I look at the profile picture, oh, it is Sheena.
Yeah, so that's basically that.
That's awesome. And again, thank you so much for coming on. It was so much fun. Before we end this episode, please let our audience know where they can find you, how they can find you, all that stuff, all the links and all that stuff, and how to get your book and such, because they need to get the book.
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, they can look at my websites, SheenaYapChan.com or thetowofselfconfidence.com. They can connect with me there. They can also, hit up all my social media, Sheena Yap Chan. They can pre-order the book on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and Indigo, which is really cool. And yeah, if you forget anything, you can always Google my name, Sheena Yap Chan, because I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet.
Great SEO, so it works. But yes, again, thank you so much, and nothing but the best for you. And I look forward to seeing you now do more, do what you want to do, which is to help other Asian women. Because I think from what I can see right now, you're already doing that so well, and I can't wait for you to keep going, because there's always Asian women that you can help, or just build a community with that. You guys all work together to be great and help the world out. Because I think, as everyone likes to say, woman is the future, woman is everything. So, if you can uplift them, it'll make the better world at the end of the day. And on that note, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Have yourself a good day, and go support Sheena and all that she does. And until next time, bye-bye. Thank you for listening to What Kind of Asian Are You? We hope that our conversations about the diverse experiences and perspectives within the Asian community have been enlightening and thought-provoking. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at What Kind of Asian Pod for updates and behind-the-scenes content. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review on Spotify and Apple. It really helps us reach more listeners who could benefit from these important conversations. If you're feeling generous and want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee through the link in our bio. Every little bit helps us continue to bring you new episodes each and every week. Most importantly, we hope you'll tune in next week for another insightful conversations about being Asian. Until then, take care.
You can now purchase The Tao of Self-Confidence, a guide to moving beyond trauma and awakening the leader within on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Walmart, Indigo, and other major book retailers. Get your copy today.